Hi, Taylor. Welcome to Jeff's Podcast Academy. It's super great to have you here. So, please tell a little bit about yourself and how you started your journey in the podcasting field, and what are the things that you're doing so far.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me. So I've been in the podcasting field for a while now. I first started first started as a listener, loving podcasts and just listening to them, probably like most people. And then from that, I wanted a place to listen to podcasts on the internet, listening to podcasts like in a web browser. And not just directly on my phone. I wanted to be able to just not have to have my phone with me to listen. And at the time, there wasn't any good places to do that. So that was when I created podparadise.com, which is my first, I guess, foray into the podcasting world, other than just as a listener. And then spawned from that was starting a hosting company, podserve.fm. So, I mean, that's just a real quick general opener, but that's how I got into this. And I have the podcast listening website and then a podcast hosting platform that I run.
That's totally great. There's just one thing that I always hear from a lot of people is that they started their podcasting journey, in any field by being an avid listener to a podcast, to some podcast. But I don't know. For me, it's like I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I kind of binge like certain podcasts from time to time, but never actually do daily listens. So it's really I feel like I'm the odd man out. Like everyone is like listening and then creating. I'm like the only guy who's just creating rather than too much listening. So I guess so that just one point I just want to say is that so can you tell a little bit about the pod paradise, how it came into this idea, what's the spark behind it, and what's the like how did you actually build your entire platform?
Sure. Yeah. So I really wanted something that could like hook up to a web browser. A lot of it for I like to listen to podcasts while I'm working.
Hmm.
And so I wanted something where I could still hear like notifications from coworkers, things like that come up, or just hear what's going um, on my computer and not
Hmm.
have to like have it silenced, listen on my phone or something. And then I wouldn't have to bring my phone everywhere. I can kind of just pop it up on a web browser.
Hmm.
Um, at the time when I was only listening to like one or two podcasts, I would just listen directly from their website,
Hmm.
or just go find them and listen to them that way. But as I started listening to like more and more podcasts, I really realized I needed like a centralized player or a app type of thing on the
Hmm.
web. And at the time, there really wasn't anything out there
Hmm.
where you could listen to podcasts, and all the podcasts that exist out there,
Yeah.
um, and subscribe to podcasts and have new podcasts like show up in your feed. Just none of that existed. And so I decided that I'll build it myself. And over a weekend, I went and coded up a simple website for myself,
Hmm.
really, at first. And it uses the same library so I guess a little tangent is that if you don't know, basically all podcast apps that aren't the really, really big ones use Apple Podcasts library. So the Apple Podcasts library of podcasts is public to anyone and any app. So they have an API that any app can use to get any podcast that's on there. So if you're a podcaster, you really want to be on Apple Podcasts because it gets you on like 50 plus different apps because they all use that same database.
Hmm.
So you get on the smaller apps that people wouldn't go and manually submit to.
Okay.
You just submit to Apple Podcasts, and then the small apps can use that library to get a catalog. So I found that API from Apple, and over a weekend I just coded up something simple, really, to listen to podcasts on, to subscribe to them. That's all I really cared about,
Hmm.
and it worked well for what I wanted. And I showed it to some of my friends, and then it kind of just started picking up.
Hmm.
More and more people started using it. I started getting more and more feature requests. I mean, I built it in the weekend, the first one, so it wasn't anything pretty, and it wasn't a bunch of features. It was just something I wanted because there was nothing else there. And then over time, I just built it up more and more to what it is today. And so that's kind of the origin story of podparadise.com, is that it was really just fitting a need that I had, and then it got popular, and now there's thousands of people using it every day, and thousands of people who have signed up. And you don't have to sign up to listen to anything, but if you want to subscribe to things, just to keep them
Hmm.
all under your own account or whatever, you do need to create accounts. There's thousands of people who've done that, so it's been pretty successful, and it's really, I still use it all the time. It solves my needs. So I originally built it. So that's how podparadise.com came to be.
Awesome. That's really great story. And I'm currently on the website right now, and I can see that you have a lot of like the promoted podcast, and the next there are like a lot of podcasts that's coming down by one. So is there any like algorithm that is being used to show like which is on top, or I just want to get to the process, like if someone who's listening and they want to sign up, because there's actually a lot of option of subscribing, getting reviews, which is really hard, because getting reviews is like the hardest thing ever for a podcaster. In Apple Podcast, if you get reviewed in one country, it won't be available in another country. Some stuff is happening with relating to that. So I just want to get to know the process of signing up, and how to make the best out of it. So if you could like give a brief about that would be great.
Sure. So you're talking about the front page. Yeah, it will
Yeah.
show the promoted row. The promoted row are my other platform that I built after Pod Paradise and still work on this day. Podserve.fm is a podcast hosting platform, and anyone who uses podserve.fm to host their podcast can get promoted on podparadise.com. Since I built both of them, it's just kind of like an added benefit, free benefit. You can just enable it, and 5 random podserve.fm customer podcasts show up every time you load that front page in that little promoted box. So those ones there, that's how they get there. And then the 200 below it are the, again, just Apple Podcasts top 200. And you can change at the bottom, you can change which country. So if you want to see the top 200 from different countries, it's all the way at the bottom, I think. Most people don't make it all the way down there, but it is there. And you can change the category to see the top 200 in other categories. Yeah, that's how that is populated. Those top podcasts. It's not actually anything that people do on Pod Paradise or listen or subscribe or review or anything like that. And those ones are just whatever Apple Podcast says the top ones are at the time. And so that's how they get there. If you do sign up for Pod Paradise, there is a added drop down for recommended podcasts. And to get your podcast to show up there, it's based on how many people on podparadise.com subscribe to that podcast. So it goes and finds like the most popular podcasts that people subscribe to that you also subscribe to. It's got a little algorithm in there to like give you something like recommended podcasts based on, like, we go see like, okay, you subscribe to this. We go look at everybody else who subscribes to that podcast, and all those people actually like this podcast too. So maybe you'll like it. But that's something that happens after you subscribe. And then again, on the reviews on podparadise.com, they aren't actually people leaving reviews on podparadise.com. Those are also pulled from Apple Podcasts. So if you click on the reviews for a podcast on podparadise.com, they're pulling directly from Apple Podcasts reviews and just listing those there. So that's how like all of that works.
Cool. So is it possible to get subscribes or reviews directly on the Pod Paradise, or you have to go to Apple Podcast to be done to not do that?
Yeah, it's been a requested feature. I haven't implemented it. You do have to just go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review there. And it should, I don't know how Apple Podcasts decides which ones they want to show or whatever. That's a mystery to me. But the ones they want to show, they give it to us and we just show them there. But yeah, there's no way to leave a review on podparadise.com.
Cool. And I hope it really comes soon, because it's like the biggest thing that always a lot of people actually suffer. And there are a few platforms which offers that service, like I'm forgetting the name of it. It was Podchaser, I think. So yeah, Podchaser, which actually also gives you the way to review it, but you have to sign up and do all the process again. So it's like, without signing up, there's an application that you could actually just review it. That would actually be great for a lot of podcasters. So I think that's a good way to do. And I just want to get idea behind the podserve.fm. So it's basically a hosting platform, as you mentioned. And it's really great because there's a lot of big players, in the podcast hosting field, really a lot of big players. So, people like you who's coming out and, he want to serve this kind of community with a lot of competition. It's really great. So I just want to let the audience know, if they're signing up for the podserve.fm, what would they get that, something different from other competitors? So your USP or something, I would really love to hear that.
Yeah. So podserve.fm came from running podparadise.com. People would email me constantly asking how they could get on podparadise.com. They say, I have an audio file, I want to upload it there. And I'm like, well, you can't do that. You need to find a podcast hosting website. And then you need to upload your audio there. And then they're going to give you an RSS feed, and you got to take that RSS feed to Apple Podcasts. You got to submit it there, and then they'll review it, and then you'll get approved, and then you'll show up on podparadise.com. And really, that happened multiple times, and I'd explain that to people, and they'd be like, "That's just too confusing." And so I set out to build podserve.fm to really make that whole process as easy as possible. So with podserve.fm, you just sign up, create your show, just do some clicks on where you want to be. Do you want to be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, Google, etc.? And then upload your episode and your cover art and everything. And once you've done that, you're done. We handle everything else. We'll get you on Apple Podcasts. We'll get you on Spotify and Stitcher, and all of those places, and you don't have to do anything else. So you just upload to podserve.fm, and you're done. And we make it as simple as possible. Is one of the main things. And then some other things that we have is you can have unlimited shows. So you don't have to worry about, if you want to create a new show or you have a new idea, you don't have to worry about having to pay more money to do that. You can upload as many episodes as you want. The episodes can be as long as you want. We don't modify your audio. A lot of places will drop down the quality of your audio automatically after upload. We don't do any of that. And then we also have the unique selling point that you can get yourself promoted on podparadise.com, which just helps get you some extra exposure. I mean, I think there's like 4 million podcasts out there now. And to really any type of, if you don't have anything, it's hard for people to find you because there's not great discoverability in podcasting right now. So either people know their podcast name and search it and find it, but kind of just browsing around people, they usually won't find many podcasts. But with the Pod Paradise and PodServe like collaboration thing, you can enable the promotion and you'll show up like you saw on the front page of podparadise.com. You'll also show up sometimes on different podcast episodes and things like that. It'll be a little banner ad pointing to your podcast. And so it's just a nice little way to get a couple extra people exposed to your podcast. It's free and included. It's just another feature we have. So that was my reason to build podserve.fm and kind of where it is right now.
That's really great. And another one thing really mentioned that I just want to point out is the discoverability, because to be honest, recently there was this one site I read from Pod News, and I went to check the visibility of my podcast, how it's working. I mean, for my podcast, I haven't actually like fully optimized on the website part yet, because it's really a lot of work on the website part, and I'm really not techie guy. My basis is mostly on social media, but if you Google me, you'll get all the details. But still, like coming as a search term for podcast or something like that, on top is really a hard thing. So when I searched for it, the visibility was really bad, really, really bad. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell? I need to change something to this. So I recently did a blog post as well. Like, you're writing about, how to get on top of the Google searches and everything. So what would be your advice for people who want to get on the top searches, for the search term? So for example, like if it's like, podcast hosting platforms, yours podserve.fm should probably be coming up on top, like, somewhere other than the top competitors, it should be coming. So I just want to mention one thing. So there are like around like hundreds and thousands of football podcasts out there, right? Football or mini sports podcasts. So you want to make sure that your podcast should coming on the searches, at least in second page at least. So what's your advice on taking that forward?
Yeah, I mean, so that's search engine optimization. It's really tough to get yourself to show up on the first page of Google. You just have to really put out a lot of content. And with your podcast, like Google right now has a tough time knowing what was said in your podcast. They don't really go into the audio and find out everything that was said. So if someone's searching some specific thing about your football podcast, and if you covered it directly in your podcast, Google doesn't know that. So they won't maybe show your podcast in the search results. And that's where having a transcript can help. If you have a full transcript of everything that was said in the podcast, that can help you kind of show up in Google for different search terms. It makes it easier for Google to know what was said. And still with that, it's not going to automatically put you at the top or anything. You'll have to be, with a lot of Google stuff, is people talking about you, linking about you, saying like in their blog, this I listened to it on this podcast. And Google's definitely a hard place, and if it's really popular, to show up in. But something, the actual apps and like Apple search for podcasts, those are actually much more rudimentary. They really only take into account a couple of things, like showing at the top. They'll when you search, they're they're only going to see if like your search term is in the name of your podcast or the author of your podcast. I think the only two things they check. So if you want people to find you by searching your name, make sure it's in your author tag. If you want people to find you by searching some other name or something, make sure that's like in your author tag. And something I recommend for people with a podcast is to have a totally unique like first part of their name, main name for their podcast. So if someone searches that on Apple Podcasts, you're the only thing that shows up. So something unique that no one ever used. But then after that, have it's not the actual name of your podcast, like a dash football podcast, or a football and then a team that you like, because if you have your first part, your totally unique first name of your podcast. When someone searches that, just you shows up. So you don't have people accidentally like looking for you and then clicking on the wrong podcast and subscribe to someone else. Just you, and you're there. And then the other half is like the generic kind of like general what your podcast is about. That will make it so that when someone searches that term, so if they search like a football podcast or a certain team or something, your podcast will show up there. It will be towards the top if you have a bunch of subscribers. If not, though, you're still showing up in that search. And as people are kind of looking for a general podcast, they don't know what they want to listen to, but they know like the kind of term, you'll be there and they may actually click you and select your podcast and end up subscribing to you. So that's my usual recommendation. You'll show up just by yourself. People search your actual name and then like a dash, the general category, and that'll get you to show up for just people searching in general and aren't looking for a specific podcast. And that's a way like to show up in Apple podcast search results, which are used by a variety of apps too. And so that would be my general recommendation for showing up in search. The Google one's going to be hard.
Yeah.
That'll take a lot of time, but the Apple podcast one it's much easier because it's not that great of a search.
Understood. And in one thing that you mentioned is a transcript. So the thing is, recently, I interviewed someone where I asked them. So, for example, if you're actually putting your show notes on on your any hosting platforms, the thing is, when you write show notes on your hosting platform, it doesn't exactly appear the same in the other platforms as well. So it's like it's so messed up. So for example, if you write for 5-10 lines, with the proper spacings and proper pointers, bulletins and everything, when you see the same on other, platforms, it isn't as the same as before. So what would you say, like, if I'm like putting an entire transcript of my show on my hosting platform, I think in probably listen notes, it looks really good because I've actually worked with a couple of clients for video editing their podcast. And when I saw that, their transcript in listen notes is really awesome. It's like they would mention from, what's the timeline, what's the question, what's the answer, and everything would be there. But in case of other platforms, it's not like the same. So any idea on how to, get that sorted out?
Yeah. So in the podcasting 2.0 spec, there is a tag you can add to your RSS feed that my host, podserve.fm, supports it, where you can upload a transcript file. Usually like an SRT is the file type, and it has like line by line everything that is said and the exact time that it was said. Nicer apps can take that and really like show you like at the time you're listening what's exactly happening there. I wouldn't put the full transcript directly in your show notes. You're right, that would get way too big. There's gonna be way too much in there. But adding a transcript file and then on your podcast website, having a link to that transcript if anyone wants to download it or just show it in like text is what I would recommend. But yeah, don't put it directly in the show notes. Maybe have a link to it in the show notes saying, hey, you can go check out my transcript here, and then also make sure you use the transcript tag in your RSS feed to point to it too. But yeah, I wouldn't do the full show notes. Your show notes will get really, really big.
Understood. I think I'd put it on website if I'm being correct. Like for example, if we have a podcast website, let's say some companies have a specific site. I mean, it's not like embedded code. For example, if you Buzzsprout, if you take the code and if you put it on your site, it will just show the entire stuff. Instead of that, they would have like customized page. I mean, in that we can put. I think would that work or any idea on that?
Yeah. I don't know how to do it with every other host. I know with podserve.fm, if you upload a transcript, we'll add a transcript link and a transcript box kind of below your show that people can scroll and read along with. So it's on the same page. The transcript's right there with the audio. And that's what I'd recommend doing if you can. Just having like a little box that has the whole audio content there and you can scroll through it.
Got it. Great. So, in the one word that you mentioned is podcasting 2.0. So, I just want to say, like, what's that about? Is it like, Web 3.0 is coming and all the stuff people are, this is one app called Fountain app, and they're
Mhm.
actually giving out, rewards for, like Bitcoin rewards for their podcasting listeners and everything. So, this is one of the things I saw in recent news. So, this podcasting 2.0, I think you still haven't got like that much famous yet. So, any take on that? Like, what's happening in the space? I really regret no.
Yeah, so podcasting 2.0 is trying to do more. I mean, I think their stuff is what enables the Fountain app to do the Bitcoin stuff, and it is used. It may not be used by the general public, but a lot of the podcast hosts and apps are using it. It's a lot of it's a new RSS tags that you're going to add to your feed, like the transcript one, and then there's like link ones to pay people, and it's also setting up a big database. So right now, a lot of places, like I was saying, is on Apple Podcasts, and that's like the database of all podcasts. Their goal is to move away from the big company owning it all and just making it an open platform for every podcast, and every podcast can get on it, and they don't take any podcasts off, and it's totally open. And so those are the big things of the podcasting 2.0. It's the podcastindex.org. You can download the whole database. Anybody can, of every single podcast that exists. I think there are 4 million something counting. And then the RSS tags that a lot of the hosts are adding to their feeds that you can use. That's the big thing with the 2.0. I would say the listeners don't really care and won't know much about it. Or even just podcast creators won't really care too much about it, but the hosts and all of the infrastructure that kind of runs podcasting, it's definitely getting widely implemented there.
Cool. So basically, it's easier to connect. So kind of a decentralized platform. How it's being used. So it's like easy to connect to your audience. I think that's where a lot of podcasters, I think they find a hard time in, because they have to use every time a third party app, like a pod and box, or something to get their attention. I think this kind of like removes the middleman, I guess, if I'm being correct.
Yeah. It's just trying to make sure podcasting stays open.
Yeah.
And anybody can be a part of it. Yeah.
Cool. So, just a couple of things before go into the final section is that podcasting has been like a major like game changer for a lot of industries. A lot of industries who now LinkedIn is kind of like coming into the podcasting space. TikTok is coming. YouTube is coming. YouTube is kind of granting like like hundreds and thousands of dollars for people to start their video shows on YouTube. So, my thing is like, do you think it's required for each and every single industry? So like there are a lot of industries out there, like healthcare and sciences, agriculture, like a lot of different industries out there. Is this hype of podcasting, this especially in 2022, in the upcoming years as well, does every industry would require a podcast, or is it like it's only based on their need and their audience? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I just see podcasting being just like another kind of social media / like platform or content platform. So every company doesn't need a YouTube channel, but people might find them there. And so if they want to be like in that space, they should make YouTube videos there, or a blog. So if they show up when people search for things on the internet, they don't have to have it, but it is a nice way, if they can, to reach more people in a different medium. And then along with like a social media, do they have to have a Twitter, or do they have to have an Instagram? They don't have to, but it's another way to just connect with their audience. And so if they have the bandwidth to do all those different things, and they think, I mean, maybe one of those is better than others. Maybe Twitter is better for a certain company than a podcast is. But really that's what I see a podcast being, is just another avenue to connect with your potential customers or potential users. And so I don't think you don't have to have it for yours. Maybe it'll work good for you. And if you're just a single person or something, and you don't have time to make a YouTube and make a podcast and write blog content and do a Twitter and do an Instagram and do a Facebook or whatever, then maybe you don't. But it's definitely a platform to get your content out to people and to help you connect with potential users and customers.
Got it. Because one of the main reasons I recently saw this is Instagram page that I follow, and they were mentioning like podcasting has been like one of the few platforms that's like giving the free speech sort of stuff. Like we can use a lot of resources from everywhere. In YouTube, there are like a lot of issues that's happening, at least in my country, in South India side, like like there are a lot of trolls and everything. Like this meme culture is there, right? People troll each other. Even in podcasts, there are like people trolling and everything will be there. And in YouTube, if you use someone else's content, you actually get copyrights and all that stuff will happen. So you have to, either the video will get removed or stuff like that will be happening. But I think at least in podcasts, like there isn't much issues with relating to this type of content, like copyright claims or this reporting and everything and stuff. So is that right, or just in your experience, do you think that it still exists a lot of stuff, this whole copyright and everything?
Well, you shouldn't be using copyright content if it's illegal, but it is less strict podcast stuff for sure. But yeah, that's kind of part of the podcasting 2.0 too. There's definitely, I think, a move for Spotify and YouTube, or some of the other, they would ideally like to own it. Like, so I think Spotify would like to own podcasts the way YouTube owns video. And they want only people uploading to Spotify, and they want only and everybody listening on Spotify, and then they can control it completely. And that's kind of something everybody's been noticing in the industry. And that was kind of part of the reason that podcasting 2.0 started, is to keep it open, to keep a database of where all the podcasts are and where everybody can listen to them. And so Spotify can't shut you down completely. They maybe kick you off their app, but there's still hundreds of podcast apps out there that you'll be on. And so that's podcasting is definitely much more open, much more less censorship, less one big company controlling everything, because of the way it works. It's kind of just like the internet. It's out there. You can't just shut it all down completely. People can still find the content. And that, like I said, that's the goal of the podcast index and the podcasting 2.0 is to keep it that way, keep that benefit of podcasting going, so that one company can't just shut it down completely or shut down people completely.
Understood. That's great. Cool. So just one final thing before going to the closing section is that is it morning or evening? That, like, what time is it?
It's morning, early morning.
Okay, cool. So it's an out of the box question I always like ask my guests. So who was actually the last person that you made smile yesterday?
Last person yesterday, probably my daughter before bed or something. Yeah.
Nice. That's really nice to hear. Awesome. So it's kind of thing I always ask, just to make sure that everyone is happy.
Yeah.
If that's okay. Great. So just the final question I want to ask is, like, I've been recently hearing a lot of news relating to the advertising sector and the podcasting, like, people running ads on different podcasts. And to be honest, I haven't really tried the advertising on a different podcast yet. Just right now, I'm trying the Instagram ads and Facebook for my podcast and newsletters and everything. So what would you say that, for people who can, have a different podcast agencies, or, businesses who's running ads on other people's podcast, like, how can they proceed with it? Like, any tips like that they could make the best out of it? Like, what would you say?
Sure. So if you're looking to pay, to promote your own podcast, I would definitely look into the apps like Overcast. They allow you to buy space on their, like, little banner ads on their app. And it's really nice because your podcast shows up on their app. So someone's looking for a podcast and your podcast will be right there. They can click it and they can subscribe right away. If you're advertising your podcast on, say, Facebook or Instagram, there's a lot of steps to get them to go from seeing your ad, clicking on it, subscribing to you in their favorite app, and then being able to listen to you. So if you want to promote your podcast by paying, that's definitely what I recommend checking out first. There's a couple different apps that'll do it. Overcast.fm is one of them, and you can buy it by slots. And then if you're looking to just advertise your company, if you're a big company, I think they already know how to do it. They talk to the big podcast agencies. But if you only want to spend like a couple $100 or something, I recommend looking at podcorn.com. Podcorn is a smaller marketplace that podcasters can sign up for, and they'll add tracking to their podcast, and they can kind of verify how many downloads they get, and they can say, hey, you can buy a slot for whatever amount on my podcast. We talk about this, and they're usually much cheaper because it's smaller podcasts, and you can kind of browse through there as a company and find maybe some podcasts that are kind of in your niche or people you want to get in front of, and you can just give money directly to the podcaster. And it's a smaller marketplace, but it's a good place to look to buy ads if you don't want to be spending, because if you want to be on the big advertising platforms, it's tens of thousands of dollars type of thing, and they're on much bigger podcasts. But for the smaller people and smaller amounts, that's where I recommend to look.
Cool. So I'm just curious because a lot of people mention that sponsorship is one of the major stuff. People get money through podcasting and everything. So for businesses, it's in the different way. What if, okay, so you mentioned that we can track the number of downloads and everything. So for example, if a podcast is having like 1,000 downloads for each episode on average, but the episode that they release that time is not getting that much traction, let's say it's getting really low. So, and they promised like this much number of leads can be promised from for this episode, and if that's not happening, so is that like an issue, or what would actually happen? So I guess there are different models, right, for that advertising. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think it'll just depend on the contract you have set up with them.
Mhm.
What they'll do, they'll have things written about that,
Okay.
what they'll pay, and whether or not things will go through. Guaranteed money, then how much you
Mhm.
get per person you send their way. It's really varies, and yeah, it's hard to say. It's gonna be different with every advertiser.
I see. So it's like you have to make sure the contract is kind of like really good, that if in case if it's screwed up, then you have to make sure that contract covers everything, or else it causes some issues, right?
Yeah, you just gotta, with anything, make sure you got everything sorted out.
Mhm. Understood. Awesome. So, Tyler, thank you so much, for hopping on the show. It was really great to have a conversation about a lot of different things. And is there anything else like you want to ask me? Like tables turned right now?
I don't have anything. You just make smile last.
Awesome. So, and in case people want to find you, podserve.fm or podparadise, and they want to contact you or something low. So it would be great to hear like what are the places that they could find you.
Yeah, the best would probably just be email me. Tyler at podserve.fm is the best place. I respond quickly. So if you have any questions or want to send me anything, just do it there. That's usually the best place to get a hold of me.
Awesome, guys. So, guys, I definitely link, his email ID in the description below, and definitely all the, sites that he's been, creating content on, and also his own stuff. So definitely, you guys can go and check it out. And yeah, you can reach out to him or me in case if you have any doubts relating to this. Thank you so much, Taylor, again for hopping on the show, and looking forward to seeing you in an amazing journey.
All right, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.